Welcome to Spirit Journey Collective. I'm your host, Sarah Ty. Get ready for compelling conversations with guests of all walks of life who believe they have found their purpose. Together, we will uncover unique backstories, hearing the raw experiences that led them to the work they are doing today. Let's expand our minds together with the captivating stories and inspiration that awaits. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Spirit Journey Collective. I have a really wonderful guest today. Her name is Brenda Mundt. She is a Radiant Soul Energizer and wears many hats, so she does different things, but mainly she focuses a lot on being a breath coach. And she is a fellow podcaster as well, which we'll have to get all that information because I'm a guest and then I've listened to her podcast. It's really great, so we'll definitely get that information too. And she's also a grief recovery specialist. So there's different things that she offers as a Radiant Soul Energizer, but I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you for being here today, Brenda.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure and honor.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved connecting with you on your podcast, and I'm excited to have you on mine.
Yes.
Why don't you share a little bit more about what it means to be a Radiant Soul Energizer and share a little bit more into what you offer?
Oh, yeah. So the Radiant Soul Energizer came from the multiple hats that I wear. I also have a full-time job. I work full-time in a medical molding facility as a system engineer. And then I have my side business called Energized Life Wellness, which has started out more in the scope of the whole fitness arena. And 3 years ago, it kind of flipped into something beyond that. So I wanted to change my name into something that was more all-encompassing, which was Energized Life Wellness. So I do the many hats that I wear. I have my own podcast called Heart Health and Healing. And I am a grief recovery method specialist. I am a wellness coach. I am a breath coach. And I am a personal trainer. And I teach a kickboxing. I'm a fitness instructor. I teach a kickboxing class. So I have my own location at my home that people come over and we do kickboxing one night a week. Right now, one night a week. And so that's many of the hats that I wear.
That's awesome. You definitely do wear lots of different hats and different genres and niches. But that's really cool. I mean, it sounds like you're following your passions in different ways.
Yes.
I love that because it's a great example that our passions don't have to just be one thing. Sometimes we think our passion and purpose is one dimensional, but usually it's all encompassing in many different fields and niches and all of that. So I love that so much. I want to talk about a couple of the things, but I really would love to focus on the breath coach aspect because I'm super curious about that. I've had a breathwork facilitator on, and I think from what we talked about, what you offer is a little different. So I'm like, oh, I really want to, figure out like more about what you do. But before we get into that, I would love to hear your backstory. So into finding your work as a breath coach or even as a grief recovery specialist. I know you mentioned that briefly too, if you'd like to share that, but I'd love to hear, how did you get to this place where you're taking your gifts and your passions and now you're helping other people with them?
So 3 years ago in September of 21, I unexpectedly lost my husband. He had passed away during COVID. And I was in a really awful, dark place. And being a person that was always into personal development and really focusing on the inner work and all that, I knew very quickly that I needed to do something to help myself because I just didn't like where I was at. And I didn't really care if I was here anymore on this earth. So like most people do, kind of go on online, start scrolling through social media. And I was actually not even searching for anything. And so the first thing I came across was, and I like to say that I didn't find it. I like to say that because I do truly believe that it found me, was the grief recovery method. And I had a call with the founder's son, and he kind of explained the program to me and everything. And then he had shared with me that I could just go through, it's an 8-week program, that I could either do just the 8-week program or along with, if I wanted to really jump all in, I could do the program itself, which is a 4 massive day intense session, and then also be trained to turn around and help others. And so I thought about it. So I, kind of mulled on it for a little bit and said, I'm like, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I'm just going to do this so I can turn around and be able to help other people. And so it was 4 days. So we're talking like something that normally takes 8 weeks and it got crammed into 4 days of going through the program itself on hyperspeed and then being turned around and being trained to be able to turn around and help others go through the program as well. It was so hard. It was emotionally and mentally draining, but it was so very worth it because that heavy, the darkness, so much of what I was feeling, by the time I got done with everything, I had the best way that I can describe how I felt was the massive pain that I was feeling after I lost my husband had lifted. It didn't go away, but it lifted. Because I mean, I wasn't even able to look at, because I mean, I had like the poster boards from, his funeral, and I had those off in a bedroom, and I wasn't even able to go in there and look at his pictures without having a massive meltdown. And so I was finally got to a point where I was able to look at it with more from holding the memories instead of just thinking, I'm not going to have this anymore. And so that kind of got me into the grief recovery method, and just because of how much it helped me. And then continuing on my healing journey and always being the type of person that always is seeking out other avenues, because I feel there's always it's not always one tool that is a fix all. I always believe that there's multiple tools that can help us on our journey. And I had came across breathwork. And so my mentor, his name is Brian Kelly, he was actually offering and again, I believe that it found me. I believe it kind of landed in my feed for a reason. And he was offering a free 5-day challenge. And I had heard about breathwork, and because I heard a lot of podcasts that I'm listening to, they'll talk about it, how beneficial was it, but I really didn't know a whole lot about it. So I'm like, well, free 5-day challenge, so it gives me a good opportunity to kind of get the feel of it all. So I did the 5-day challenge, and I'm kind of like, okay, I'm liking this. I want more. So then I bought his 30-day program. And then I did that, which he kind of went over all the different breathing techniques. But within that 30-day program, he had one of his breathwork journeys. So the breathwork journey can last anywhere between like 50 minutes, hour, 15 minutes, something like that. And I actually had to convince myself to do it because I had watched his stuff on social media and how people reacted and everything, and it kind of freaked me out on the reactions people had. And I'm like, I feel like I'm going to be like, what happens if I become possessed or something? Because like the people looked like they were going through this outer body experience. So I finally got to a point where like, okay, you need to do this. You need to decide what day you're going to do it and just put it on your calendar and just be done with it. Make the decision to stick with it. So I did. And I actually did it on a Labor Day weekend because I knew I didn't have to go to work on Monday to give myself that extra time. So I had texted so I have a group text message with my sisters. So I texted them. I'm like, hey, tomorrow morning I'm doing this breathwork thing. And I'm like, if you don't hear from me by noon, can you just kind of maybe check up on me just in case? Needless to say, I was absolutely fine. And I did the breathwork journey. And when I got done, I lay there and the first words, and I don't know if I can cuss on here or not, but the 2 words that came out of my mouth was holy shit. It was a good holy shit. And I'm just like, oh my God. I'm like, that was absolutely incredible. And then the next thought that came out in my head was, I'm like, everybody should be doing this because life is challenging and life is hard. And I just, so much that came out of me in that one session was just unbelievable. I went through all sorts of things, everything that they tell you in the introduction. I'd had numbing, I had tingling throughout my body. I cried like no tomorrow. And in the full-blown breathwork journeys, we build up to screams. And they tell you that you don't have to scream, but they invite you to scream because it's a massive, massive energy release. And I did not have any issue screaming at all. And my poor cats, I have 2 cats and they're normally on the bed with me. And when I belted out my scream, those poor cats just like bolted off of the bed like no tomorrow. But it was just incredible. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I want more of this. So then I found out that they had a program to become a certified breath coach. And so I met with somebody on that. And I'm like, this was like a no-brainer to me because I'm like, I just absolutely fell in love with it. I went through, got certified as a breath coach. And then, so my mentor is, to my knowledge, he is like him and his co-founders, Breath Masters Academy, is the only ones that offer 9D breath work. So 9D is 9-dimensional sound. So you have the helium frequencies, you have the subliminal messaging. I can't remember all of them, but it's just that it's a lot happening all at one time while people are being guided in coaching while the music is being played. I think breathwork itself is like amazing, but you add that 9D component to it. So like the breathwork that we do, that we initially got trained on, was just playing music, but the music had certain energy to it. And then we did the guiding and coaching along the way with that music in the background. So that was very powerful in itself, but now you add that 9D component to it, it takes breathwork to a whole different level. It is so powerful, it's just unbelievable. So then he offered the 9D facilitator training, but because I'm certified as a breath coach, I can actually guide people through the 9D breathwork journeys myself, that is what I love doing. I love doing the guided and the coaching, be able to put my voice behind it, my passion behind it, and my tone behind it, as compared to a 9D facilitator where they put the headphones on people or give people the headphones to wear, whether they're doing it online or in person. And then the facilitators have to play the recordings from my mentor or whoever created them. But me being a coach, I'm actually able to do the guiding myself, which is the part that I love the most. So yeah, 9D breathwork is just so incredibly powerful.
That's a amazing story. I mean, first of all, I'm so sorry for your loss. I
Thank you.
cannot imagine what that was like to go through. And I find it so interesting. You mentioned how you were already kind of a self-aware enough to know about personal development and already know that the state of mind you're in wasn't good. And
Yeah.
I find it interesting because we go through things in our past that like it suddenly is relevant especially when we're going through really difficult times. So it was like you needed to already be immersed in that personal development work in order to be able to be mindful enough to see what was happening when you were actually going through a difficult time. And so I always found it super fascinating when you're able to kind of see like, wow, thank goodness this was already a support system for me that I didn't even know I was going to need. And then it
Right.
turned out it was there for you when you really did need it. And I mean, because if you didn't have that self-awareness, it probably would have taken you longer to look for that outside support.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's amazing that you again were aware enough to go, okay, I need help. I need some support. This is really hard to navigate through. And, and again, when you look at the hindsight to like look how doors open for you, obviously these components were there. They were supposed to be there for you. I think it sounds like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so the first thing that you did was the grief one, right? That helped you process your grief.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. And I love that you are able to take something from that and say, okay, now that I've been through this really difficult grief period, now I want to help other people. Because, I think one of the best things about being a coach or being a mentor is most of the time it's because you've been through it and now
Right.
you want to help someone so they don't have to go through we all go through it in our own way. Like we all have to process it our own way, but to do it on your own versus doing it with help is just night and day. And another thing that I love to share too is we teach what we most need to learn most of the time. So you needed that grief support probably just as much as other people needed your support, right? So it's
Yeah.
kind of you're probably growing and healing. And then when it was time, it was like spirit was like, okay, here's another component. Let's drop this other one for you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then it became the breath work. So that's really cool. Do you combine the breath work and the grief support?
So that's actually interesting that you asked that. So I do offer them separate, and I'm actually currently working with a client through the Grief Recovery Method program. And I had spoken with him, and I had asked him, I'm like, "Have you ever heard of breath work?" And he's like, Yeah, I was like, I'm familiar with it a little bit, so I kind of shared a little bit more about it. So we have like five short, like a 5 minute breathwork activation and a relaxation, and then there's also like a shorter one, it's called 12 minutes getting great. So I asked him, I'm like, well, after the end of our session, I'm like, are you okay? Would you mind wanting to do like either a breathwork activate, a 5 minute activation or relaxation, or if we have extra time, we can do the 12-minute one. And he's like, yeah, that would be great. So because I'm just doing the one-on-one with this individual, so it can actually, the program can be condensed down to like 7 weeks. So then I asked him, I'm like, would you be interested in on our 8 weeks, if I actually guide you through a full-blown breathwork journey? And he's like, yeah, that would be great. So yeah, with him, I actually did kind of blend the two. So each week is just a short breath work, but then I am going to end it with a full-blown breathwork journey focused on grief and loss.
That's amazing. It does sound like the two complement each other.
Yes, they
And, you
do.
know, it could be one of those things where maybe as you grow, you might realize, oh my gosh, this is a whole other program on the table that's not necessarily combined yet. That could be.
Yeah.
And so that's
Yeah.
really cool.
I've actually, because I've actually taken kind of the breath work, and I'm in the middle of actually a beta launch. I'm calling it Radiant Living Roadmap. I'm not quite sure if I'm going to stick with the name of it or not. So, which is a 12-week program. And so each week has a theme. So taught me like inner child work with our authentic selves, dealing with stress and anxiety, healing ancestral lines. So like each week has a theme, and we build one week on top of the other. So I have like a video component to kind of talk about the topic, and then they have like exercises. They have like a handout they have to print off and do some homework. Because I truly believe that sitting there listening to somebody is not as life-changing as actually doing the work and actually processing and answering questions and thinking about things. But then what I do is that we meet once a week, and then I guide them through a breathwork journey for the theme of the week. And so we're halfway through that right now. So I've kind of blended things a little bit with that. And so far, that has been the feedback I've been getting from my beta testers have been incredible.
I love that. That's awesome.
It's time to take a short break from our wonderful speaker. Are you in the need of guidance around love, career, family, life, or purpose? Embark on a spiritual journey inward with an intuitive tarot reading. Depending on what you're needing and looking for, I offer private one-on-one sessions as well as personalized email readings. It doesn't matter what the question is. A reading with me provides connection with your higher self, offering curated personal messages, or what I like to refer to as spiritual roadmaps, guiding you to the future outcome you desire. Readings are insightful and affordable. If you'd like more information or to schedule a reading with me, please see the link below.
For those that don't quite understand what breathwork is, could you break it down or maybe give some examples? I had another guest, gosh, months ago now, who was a breathwork facilitator and kind of, you know, and he had offered me a complimentary like program as, you know, because I had him on. And so it was like a thank you for having me on. And it was really cool being able to check it out, because for me, I always just assumed breathwork was just kind of like take some deep breaths, calm down. You know what I mean? And then through his program, I thought, oh my gosh, no, these are like actual techniques, and there's like different techniques for different situations. So for those that are like me and maybe are like, is it just, do you just breathe like in and out, or what is it? Could you break down what breath work is for those that might be curious?
So breathwork, there's different kinds of breathwork. So there are the different breathing techniques. And then there's actual, so like my main focus is on the breathwork journeys, which is more, to me just because of the impact that had on me, is like life-changing. I mean, not that normal breathwork isn't, but so, because breathwork, I'm going to go off of like what I do. So which, like I said, which is the 90 breathwork journeys. So what it does is, because through the journeys, they're doing an active type of breathing. So they breathe in and out through their mouth. So it's a very active type of breath work. And then what it does is it gives our mind the opportunity to have so it kind of puts our brain into like our prefrontal cortex. So be able to have an opportunity to shut the monkey mind down. because of the breathing that we're doing in that prefrontal cortex. We have the opportunity to quiet that down and tap into the subconscious mind, so we can start doing the rewiring and erasing, starting to change those limiting beliefs. And through the active breath work, your body just starts going through so many different things, between numbing and tingling, and your body will start tensing up. They have this, they call it, it's called tetany, but they refer to it as lobster claws, because when your hands tighten up, they look like lobster claws. And then emotions, because of the breathing that you're doing, so many emotions start surfacing up that, depending upon what the person is going through, they may start crying before, we even get to that point. And I know journeys that I've done. I mean, I haven't gotten through too many journeys not crying. But I mean, and the thing is, when those emotions all come up, we tell everybody, it's like, if emotions come up, you want them to come up and let them come up, because the main thing is to not stuff them down. And because with breath work, because what you're doing, the active breathing and everything, you're able to release so many emotions without even saying a single word, because it all is coming out of your body physically, by either your body kind of going through tightness or wanting to move around, or you needing to cry. And I mean, me personally, literally, I've had things, a breathwork journey that I was doing, I got to the point where I was like stomping my feet into the bed like a little child going through a temper tantrum. And then I've had people kind of go into like almost like a high child's pose type position to get more activation through their body. And when they were able to do that, then the emotions really started flowing. So that's like the breath work that I guide people through. And that's why it's so powerful, because a lot of people don't like talking about their emotions, because we're so good. We got taught at a very young age to stuff our emotions down and to be so strong and suck it up and all this kind of stuff. And so a lot of people, I feel, don't like talking about their emotions. And this is one avenue that's really good for somebody that doesn't like talking about their emotions, because stuff is going to come up whether you like it or not. And it's going to come out of your body in a physical manner. And what's really interesting is I've experienced it myself, and I've had many of my clients that they'll feel discomfort like in a certain part of their body. And for me, it was my left shoulder, because that was a weak spot of my body. And it's like, after they get done with the breathwork journey, it's like their pain is gone. It is like insane. I've had people come doing breathwork journeys, and she was in so much pain when she got there, and she's just kind of like, oh my gosh, she's like, my whole body hurts. She's like, my back hurts. And she's kind of sharing all this stuff with me. And then we got done, and then she kind of stayed back, and I'm like, you okay? And she's like, oh my God. She's like, I cannot believe this. She's like, I was in so much pain when I got here. She's like, I feel fantastic. And because when we hold on to so much of that stuff, it stays stored in our body, and it impacts us in so many different ways, not only on an emotional level, but on a physical level too. And I think that some people just kind of don't realize that by hanging on to some of that stuff, that some of it might be related to stuff that we're keeping stored inside of us.
That's a really, really great way to explain what you offer. And especially for those that might just think, oh, are we just breathing? But no, it's so much more than that. It's almost like
gosh.
a interesting combination of somatic.
Yes.
I mean, it sounds like it's somatic in that you guide yourself, like you're the facilitators, and like you're the person who's helping with the breathing and the journey. And then it sounds like people who are experiencing it are also on their own terms having some kind of a somatic breakthrough through their
Yes.
body and releasing
Correct.
it. And I think you're right. A lot of people don't realize that our emotions they get stored in the body, and that's where you get the term disease is dis-ease, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's incredible. Do you feel like you found your gifts and your purpose, like what you're meant to be doing here? Do you feel like you've really tapped into that and the breathwork work that you offer?
Yes, I do. Initially I thought it was going to be, the whole fitness wellness piece of it, but just the way my life turned and everything. And I definitely do feel that this is truly my passion, because I'm able to help people at such a deep level and a very important level. I mean, not that fitness and nutrition's not, But that emotional healing piece of it, that is so crucial. Absolutely do. I do feel I found my purpose.
I love that. What is it about the journey and the work that you're doing that really like fulfills you and lights you up?
The feedback that I get from people when they're done with their breathwork journeys. And I even like my beta testers that when I'm going through my program right now, I literally had a gal email me. She was kind of going through some stuff at home, and it's been very stressful for her. And she's like, I am so glad I'm a part of this program. She's like, because it's literally has been life-saving. And to hear somebody say that makes me feel so good to the point where it actually almost brings tears to my eyes. And just the feedback that I've been getting, and because a lot of people, they'll come in thinking that, they'll be coming into it thinking that they're all stressed out and full of stress and anxiety. But then once they come in and actually start doing the work, and then other things start surfacing, and they're kind of like, oh my God, I'm like, I didn't realize how much of my childhood is impacting me now. And so they're starting, all of the things are starting to open up, and they're starting to see things more clearly. And when that happens, oh my gosh, it's an amazing feeling.
I love that. And I just want to point out something for listeners who, might be wanting to find their passion or their purpose and don't really know where to look, or even might be feeling like, well, do I even have one? Which I think we all have our own gifts. We all have
Yes.
some contribution and that we're meant to be sharing with the world and helping others. And with your journey specifically, when you went through the grief of losing your husband, you shared that there was a point in time where you were like, why am I even here? And now it's like you've come full circle, and now you're able
Yeah.
to really see like, wow, I'm so glad I'm here, because now these people whose lives I'm touching, they might not have gotten this kind of experience if I wasn't doing the work that I'm doing. So
Yeah.
it's just incredible seeing the full circle of it.
Yeah. So I do have to say, it took me a little bit to get there. I mean, I was feeling really good about everything that I was doing. And literally one morning, because I had I guided a group through a breathwork journey the night before, and just the feedback from them was just amazing. And I woke up thinking about it, feeling all good about it. And all of a sudden, I had this massive swarm of guilt that came over me. Because I'm like, I wouldn't be doing this if I hadn't lost my husband. And it pulled me down so quick. And it had bothered me all day, and I couldn't. I literally had. I mean, at work, and this is all festering inside of me. And I literally had to run off and hide into the bathroom and cry for a little bit, because I couldn't. I didn't know how to process it, all the guilt that I was feeling. And a friend of mine, one of my high school best friends, her and I are in touch because she's going through her own grief journey. And I reached out to her and I shared to her, like, hey, I'm like, I'm like, I got to unload this on somebody, and you're my sounding board. And I told her everything that I was feeling. And then she came back with me with something, and it didn't actually register until I had gotten home. And then I kind of thought about it a little bit more. And then I had to do I had to do a reframe and be like, this is another gift that he's giving me from the other side. And so, I mean, it took that reframe to be able to get me there, and not be consumed by the guilt of being able to do this. I should say I wouldn't be doing this, if he would be here. But it's a gift that he gave me.
That's a really beautiful way to reframe such a difficult experience, and
Hmm.
it also almost opens the door to like a whole other spiritual aspect as well. I'm
Yeah.
reading this book right now. I don't know if you've heard of it or read it, but it's called Journey of Souls by Michael Newton, I think.
Mm,
I could be totally wrong with the author, but it's called Journey of Souls, and
okay.
it's fascinating. It's this psychologist who accidentally stumbled on past life regression, and then through that stumbled on those that were in between their past lives and their present lives, and then like started exploring the spiritual realm, and that was
Okay.
became like his life's work. It's super fascinating. It sounds super woo woo, but it's very scientific based. Like it's a lot of it is these tapes that were recorded and just transcribed. But
Oh,
anyways,
wow.
certain things that come up are things like soul contracts. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's this
Mm,
idea that when we come to our lifetime now, we have soul contracts with our soul family, so to speak, with those we've been here before. And, that there's this idea that maybe there was something in the contract of that was his time and now it's your time. And it was like you said, a gift from him. So it's just a really, really beautiful way to reframe it, I think. So from here, I would love to shift to what I'd love to call synchronicity story time. It's one of my favorite segments because I feel like it's how we get to talk about real life magic in a way. Do you have any synchronistic stories that you can share that, whether it's a positive paranormal story or how things just lined up perfectly in a way that there's no explanation for it? Do you have anything like that you could share?
I do. The first thing that comes, I should say, the first and only thing that actually comes to mind is after my husband had passed away, I knew I was not able to stay in our house for various reasons. We had the crappy conversations that if anything, were to happen, he's like, if anything ever happens to me, he's like, this is what you need to do. You need to sell the house. You need to sell all my stuff and find a place smaller, more manageable for yourself. And so, I knew what I needed to do. But the thing is, at the time when he passed away, it's like the housing market was on fire. And so I'm kind of like, oh boy. And so, this was in September, but then I was leading into winter. And I'm like, do I really want to sell during the winter? But then I'm like, okay, but the market's really on fire right now and all this kind of stuff. And so we had our house, and then we had an 1,800 square foot shop that because he was very mechanically inclined. And he was a boy with a lot of toys. And he had that 1,800 square foot shed full of stuff. So, he had truck, 3 cars, 2 snowmobiles, 3 trailers, a hoist, tools up the yin yang. It was insane. And so I knew I had to start selling this stuff. And then I started with all the big stuff. So between having to sell everything, and I didn't realize it until after the fact, when everything was kind of to a certain point where I kind of was able to sit back and look back, but everything kind of just fell into place and flowed seamlessly. And how I just happened to find all the, just the right buyers for certain things. And I managed to get the prices that I wanted for things, for what they were actually valued at. And everything just flowed, it just seemed to flow so seamlessly. Then I had even gotten to a point where all of his stuff that he had in his shop, thank God for my family and friends that had helped me kind of organize everything. And it's like one day I had a man's shop sale, and granted I was able to sell a lot of stuff, but he had a lot of stuff. I still had so much left. I'm like, what am I going to do with this? I'm like, because by this time I was so done selling stuff on Facebook and whatnot. I'm done with all these loony people trying to, get everything for nothing. And I was done with it. So I had stopped by a friend of mine who owns a garage in the town near me, but the town by me. And he referred me to somebody else who actually happened to be somebody that just lived right down the road from me. And so I talked with him. He came over, looked at everything, and he's like, I have a few people in mind. So he reached out to his people, and within a matter of, I'm literally talking days. And the other guy came out to the shop, and then so this mutual guy was there as well. So initially it was going to be all the tools and all that. He was just going to buy everything, the lot, for X dollars. And so he came up with the price that we were in agreement with. So that was a done deal. And all of a sudden he's like, well, what are you doing with all this other stuff? Which was all oils and paint cans and just all more maintenance type things. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, well, I got to do something with it. And he's like, if you're willing to take a certain price for it, he's like, I'll buy the rest of that too. I'm like, okay. And so managed to negotiate, got a price on that. And then I'm like, and just like that, the problem was gone. Because this guy came in there, initially only thinking he was going to take one thing, but actually ended up taking everything else. So just everything just kind of fell into place. Even just, I managed to sell my house and to be able to get what I wanted for it. Plus, because I wanted to negotiate post occupancy, so I didn't have to move twice. And then so I managed to, that just, the buyers happened to just, who I didn't think was actually going to buy it, because when my realtor had showed the house to them, it didn't sound very promising. And then all of a sudden he came back and he's like, change of plans here, they're interested. And so that all kind of worked out. And then just even the fact that the house that I'm in now, and how I was having a hard time finding a place that I was happy with, because I'm a country girl, I like my space. And then my realtor's kind of like, hey, I just happened to start working with this lady. Her dad passed away and the yard is beautiful. It's on 2.3 acres. Why don't you go over and take a look at it? If you like the yard, then I'll see if she will be willing to show you the inside of the house. Well, I fell in love with the yard, and that was in winter. And all that just flowed so nicely. So I just think kind of everything with that, just how everything just kind of fell into place. And like I said, I didn't even realize it until after the fact, when I was able to finally like stop and think about it and look back on just how seamlessly everything happened. And I do truly believe, without a doubt in my mind, that I was being guided through the whole thing.
And that's what it sounds like. It sounds like he was helping you with the transition.
Yeah.
And like, obviously in his own way energetically, but it just sounds like, yeah, you had that support, even though you didn't realize you had that like spiritual beyond the realm support. But it sounds like everything was just right where it needed to be.
If I can get a little woo-woo.
Yeah, please.
One of the days when I was walking down towards the shop to work on the organization and everything, and I had a couple of my sisters were coming over, and I was literally like halfway down there, and then all of a sudden I just had this massive energy come swooping over me, to the point where it like literally stopped me dead in my tracks. And I just stopped, and then I looked up and I took a deep breath, and I'm like, I got this. And there was no doubt in my mind that it was him.
I would recommend checking out that book, Journey of Souls, because they talk about how a lot of the times not a lot of times, but there are times where spouses especially will stay around to make sure that their living spouse is okay, and check on them and kind of send them signs to let you know, hey, I'm okay and I'm here for you in their own way. So
yeah, he actually led the house that I'm in. He led me here. So he's my morning dove, and which is a whole nother story that I can to condense it down. He's my morning dove, and through just a certain sequence of events that had happened. But when I came to look at this house, I had told my family, and like I said, if there's a morning dove at that house when I go to look at it, I'm like, that's my sign. And I looked at the house, and I had a different thoughts about it. I was more open to it because I love the yard. But even inside the house, I'm like, well, okay. I'm like, well, I don't like the colors, but you can paint the walls and stuff like that. And so I felt pretty good about it. So I pretty much knew what my decision was going to be. And my realtor and I were standing at the kitchen looking out the patio window out into the backyard. And also I stood there, and I was like, my eyes happened to gaze down. And also I'm like, I said to my realtor, I'm like, is that a mourning dove over there? And I told him the story, and all of a sudden he's like, yeah. And I started crying. And all of a sudden he's like, oh shit. He's like, the mourning dove, I'm sorry. I'm like, no. There's nothing to be sorry about. I'm like, I don't need to go home and think about it. I'm like, that was my sign right there.
I got chills. Oh, that's amazing. So if our listeners want to work with you and they want to do a breath work journey, or even the griefs recovery specialist, any of the things you offer, and I'm assuming you offer it virtually as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So how can they find you if they want to work with you?
Either through, I'm on Instagram. So when I did Instagram, I forgot my A. So it's Brenda Mundt. Either Instagram, Facebook. My Facebook is under my personal page under my name, Brenda Mundt, or Energized Life Wellness, either of those. Also my website, which is www.energizedlifewellness.com. So any of those places you can reach out to me.
Perfect. I will be sure to put all that in the show notes. Yep. And
thank
you so much for coming on and sharing your story, sharing your gifts, sharing everything that you're doing. It sounds like you're making a huge difference in the world. So just keep doing what you're doing. And thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me on another inspiring episode. Remember, your purpose is a unique and unfolding path. I hope these conversations have ignited a spark within you. Until next time, keep exploring, growing, and embracing the beautiful adventure of connecting with your purpose. Stay tuned for more meaningful conversations. If you enjoyed the episode today, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And thank you for joining me on this journey.